Hi, I'm Claire. And my sister's husband called me a beggar out loud in the middle of a bank I used to help fund. He smirked like I was nothing, and the rest of them just watched like they'd done before. They erased my name from documents, group chats, family photos, even my mother's will. But what hurt more wasn't being left out. It was realizing they'd planned it all along. Why would your own family go this far? Just to make you feel like a ghost. I showed up 15 minutes late. The valet looked me over like I was someone's assistant, not a guest. Who are you here to see? He asked twice, like I didn't belong there. I muttered, reservation under Whitaker, and he handed me a valet ticket like I was a stranger crashing someone else's party. The restaurant was glass, brass, and too many shadows. The kind of place people chose to be seen, not to eat. I had barely stepped inside when the air changed, chilled not by temperature, but by recognition, or rather, the lack of it. No one looked up from their tables. No one waved, no smiles. I walked past the bar, eyes sweeping the room like a radar, hoping to catch a glimpse of someone who remembered I existed. And then I saw them, the Whitakers, bathed in golden light beyond a gilded archway, clinking glasses and laughing like they were filming a lifestyle commercial. My sister, Vanessa, sat dead center, polished, glowing in a navy dress that probably cost more than my rent. Her husband, Lester, was right beside her. Their daughter. My niece leaned in and whispered, but not low enough. I caught every syllable. That's her, the one Mom's been rescuing like some charity project. I stopped mid-step. My heels clicked too loud against the polished floor. I smiled instinctively, the same way you smile when someone steps on your foot, but you're too polite to scream. No one turned to greet me, not even Vanessa. I made my way to the nearest waiter, trying to steady my voice, control the tremor blooming in my chest. Hi, I believe there's a seat under Whitaker. He paused, looked toward the back, like he wasn't sure if I was a guest or a disturbance. That's when Lester emerged. He walked like a man who owned the room, not with elegance, but with entitlement. Claire, he barked, his voice laced with disdain, like he was calling out a stray mutt. Didn't think you'd actually show. IRSPED, I answered, my voice a notch above a whisper. He laughed, not loud, but sharp enough to draw blood. Next time, maybe run it by someone who actually counts. Then louder, for the waiter, for the crowd, for everyone. We don't serve beggars, he said, eyes scanning for approval. Maybe she's looking for the shelter a few blocks down. A few chuckles followed, tight-lipped, guilty, but present. That was all he needed. I didn't blink. I didn't break. I simply gave a small nod, walked past him like I'd meant to find the restroom all along. My heart was jackhammering, but my face was marble. No one stopped me. No one came after me. I found a forgotten corner near a window that stared out into a brick wall. Fitting. I looked at the glass and saw myself. Flawless makeup, pressed dress, perfectly invisible. A ghost in lipstick. They'd erased me before, in whispers, missing invites, family portraits where I was accidentally cropped out, group chats I was never added to. But tonight was different. It was a public execution of my place in the family. I thought of my mom, her voice echoing, "Family's what catches you when the world doesn't." She never got to see how far that net had rotted, or maybe she saw it and just looked the other way. I stood there, motionless, long enough to hear every toast I wasn't in, to smell the duck I wasn't offered, to feel shame settle over me like a tailored coat, made to fit. When I finally turned away, I didn't slam a glass or shout them down. That would have been a gift, confirmation that they still mattered enough to wound me. I stepped into the chilled Dallas night. My heels echoed like a funeral march. Less victory, more surrender. Sitting in the hush of my parked car, I reached into my purse and pulled out the unopened envelope, sealed, waiting, heavy with possibility. I had forgotten it. Until tonight. I gripped it like a blade. Not again, I whispered into the darkness. I couldn't go home, not carrying that kind of humiliation. So I drove, past streetlights and ghosts of old memories, until I reached White Rock Lake, deserted. Just me, the whispering trees, and the city lights blinking from a safe distance, like they knew better than to get involved. I pulled over near the edge of the lake, stepped out, and followed a gravel path that barely crunched beneath my heels. The earth felt softer than the people I'd left behind. You don't always get told you're not wanted. Sometimes they just design the whole room to exclude you. That sentence repeated in my mind like a broken lullaby. It wasn't new, this feeling of being a ghost among your own blood. But tonight, it stung like never before. Maybe it was the way my niece's words landed, so flippant, like she'd rehearsed them. Or maybe it was Lester's smug tone, so certain he could humiliate me without consequence. And the worst part? He was absolutely right. No one even blinked. I sat on a weathered bench, folded my arms, and stared into the dark water. My mind wandered. Thursday, I think. A package had arrived, not from Vanessa herself, of course. Her assistant, all smiles and secrets, handed me a heavy white box tied with satin like a peace offering I never asked for. I didn't even know they'd made another photo album. Inside, curated happiness, glossy pages showing holidays, birthdays, perfect vacations. Every photo labeled like it belonged in a museum. I didn't flip through it to feel nostalgic. I needed to see if the feeling in my gut, cold and certain, was right. In every picture I should have been in, something was off. In one, I was blurred behind a group hug. In another, just my hand made the cut, resting on a chair beside Vanessa's perfect nuclear family. Like I'd been there in body, but edited out in spirit. The last page hit like a slap. The Whitakers, our legacy. Full spread. Not a single mention of me. No aunt, no sister, not even a blurry cameo. That wasn't a mission. That was deliberate rewriting. I left the album on my table for days, untouched, like it might accuse me if I looked too closely. But tonight's dinner, it reminded me exactly what it felt like to be airbrushed out of your own bloodline. Just hours earlier, I had walked into that restaurant prepared, arrived early, printed RSVP in hand. Even brought a hostess gift, because I didn't want to be that sister. The difficult one. The one they whisper about. I approached the hostess stand with a smile I'd practiced in the mirror. She looked confused, tapped her iPad a few times, then tilted her head. "I'm sorry, ma'am, you're not on the list." That word, ma'am, landed like a slap. "No, I RSVP'd weeks ago," I said, my voice catching that polite sing-song tone women use when they know anger will only cost them more. "I have the email right." She didn't even look, just smiled like a mannequin and said, "Let me check with the family." She never did. No chair, no name card, not even a folded napkin to mark my place. Just a hollow where I used to be, now filled by silence and denial, and no one bothered to inform me of the replacement. I remember looking across the room, watching Lester toast his mother-in-law, like they were in some Hallmark ad. Laughter echoed, glasses clinked, and Vanessa, my sister, didn't even glance my way. It wasn't ignorance, it was erasure. It's the kind of cruelty that leaves no scars, just shifts your spine, dulls your voice, makes you shrink in rooms where you once belonged. Had this just started? Or had it been rotting under the surface for years while I kept showing up with hope and blind forgiveness? I remembered Christmases where I was left out of group chats, family photos with captions like, "Everyone made it," when I was literally in the room. Introductions where I was reduced to Vanessa's little sister, like I hadn't built a whole life of my own. And just like that, it wasn't just tonight that broke me. It was every subtle cut, each left-out invite, every silent glance, every accidental exclusion, layered until they built a fortress I'd been locked out of. The truth didn't scream, it settled, heavy, cold. This wasn't forgetfulness. It was a full-on erasure, signed, sealed, and sanctioned by blood. I drove in utter silence. No music, just the rhythmic drone of tires and the sudden, sharp ache of clarity slicing through my ribs. When I got home, I didn't kick off my shoes or drop my purse. I headed straight to the bookshelf, like muscle memory, and started tearing open drawers. I was looking for what they hoped I'd forgotten. Buried beneath dust and old tax returns were folders I'd once hidden for being too emotional. Contracts, bank slips, signatures, things I wasn't meant to hold on to, but did anyway. A part of me always suspected I'd need them. I didn't even try to sleep. I sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by evidence, proof of everything they told me I didn't deserve. It looked like chaos to anyone else. To me, it was a roadmap back to myself. If there's no seat for me at their table, I whispered into the dark, I'll build a table they'll have to kneel to. That night, I didn't mourn my family. I launched an investigation. The digital clock blinked 12:17 a.m., but I was wired. My body throbbed, not from exhaustion, but from years of holding myself upright in rooms I was never truly welcome in. I slipped off my heels, pulled on socks, and exchanged my silence for resolve. I stood frozen in front of the hallway closet. Top shelf, right corner. I knew exactly where I'd hidden it. In a beat-up box marked, Taxes 2009, a label I used to throw off suspicion. I found it. The green folder. The one I swore I'd never need. Just a cheap plastic folder from Staples, but inside were the receipts of truth. Scanned copies of my mother's original will, underlined, annotated in my handwriting from the week she died. I sank back down and flipped through each page with trembling fingers. Section 4, clear as daylight, left a portion of the estate to me, by name, with no ambiguity. My name, typed with precision, Claire Maynard. Not sister, not relative, not also included, just me, the rightful heir. But something didn't add up. I remembered the funeral, the lawyer who stood there, reading a version that didn't have Section 4. That document had felt off. This version, the one in my folder, was signed and notarized weeks before Mom even went into hospice. But the will they read at the funeral? That one had a signature dated 3 days before she died. I stared at the dates, the timeline unraveling in front of me. My heart pounded. This wasn't an oversight. It was a surgical revision. By 2 a.m., I had my laptop open. I wasn't writing to Vanessa, not to Lester. I wrote to someone who still might care about facts. Carla Greer, Mom's old paralegal. I typed a single line. Carla, did anyone alter my mom's will in the final 30 days? I hit send before fear could second-guess me. I tried to rest, but sleep came in splinters, chased away by galloping thoughts and ugly possibilities. By sunrise, her email sat waiting. Claire, you'll want to look at the access logs. Something was changed, remotely, on a Saturday night. That's all I can say. I read it twice. Saturday night. I pulled out my paper planner. Yes, I still use one. And flipped to the right week. My gut already knew what I'd find. That weekend, I was in Toronto for work. No reception, no Wi-Fi, because I'd forgotten to activate my international plan. Stupid, I know. I didn't even know Mom had been moved to hospice. By the time I got back, she was already in the ground, and during that exact window, when I was unreachable, someone had edited her will. I didn't need to guess who. The next morning, I headed straight for the Whitaker estate. Vanessa was off detoxing in Palm Springs, some overpriced wellness retreat she'd flaunted on Instagram. The housekeeper, Rosa, would be the only one there. Thankfully, she still had a soft spot for me. Rosa opened the door with a warm, familiar smile and didn't ask questions. Just grabbing some of Mom's old books, I said. Not a lie. Just incomplete. I wandered the halls like a grieving daughter, trailing fingers across walls, until I reached what they called the legacy corridor. Family history, museum style. Every photo trimmed in gold. Every smile rehearsed. Captions like "Our Roots" and "Founders of the Whittaker Lineage." But I wasn't really there. Not in the way that mattered. In a photo from the 90s, I stood behind Vanessa, half my face missing. Thanksgiving? Only 3 plates, even though I'd helped cook. In another, Vanessa held my niece like a prize, while I lingered blurry on the edge, more like a rumor than a relative. Then I saw it, the legacy wall. 6 massive canvases lined up like royalty. Vanessa and Lester dead center, arms draped like power, their daughter beside them, and both sets of grandparents flanking the sides. I wasn't just absent, I'd been erased, not even a footnote. This was their version of the Whittaker bloodline. I didn't make the cut. I traced the edge of one frame. It was cold, unforgiving, but I didn't cry, didn't flinch. I stood there until Rosa reappeared, shifting awkwardly in the doorway. "Did you find what you needed?" she asked. "Almost," I replied, with a smile that tasted like steel. "Just browsing family history." At home, I opened my journal and wrote one line. They didn't forget me. They deleted me. Beneath it, I jotted the will's revision date and circled it twice. They rewrote history. And I stood there holding the pen. Then I reached for the folder I had buried deep, emotionally and literally. The pages were stiff, their edges curled with time. I laid them out under the pendant light like evidence on a courtroom table. Each page led me back to a version of myself that still believed family meant protection. There were names, accounts, power of attorney notes, things I'd once read through blurred, tear-soaked eyes, too naive to see what was already being stolen from me. A chill took root in my chest. Not fear, but clarity. The kind that doesn't come from rest, but from exhaustion. I was done being polite. I reached for my phone. Not sure why I called Aunt Lorraine first. Maybe because I still believed someone might remember the truth. Maybe I just needed to hear one voice say, "This is wrong." She picked up on the second ring. "Lorraine, it's Claire." Pause. Then smugly, "I heard you made quite the scene at dinner." I hadn't said a word that night, but of course silence could be twisted too. "I just need to know, did Mom ever talk about changing her will? Anything near the end?" She exhaled so hard I could hear the judgment in it. "Claire, she was dying. Her wants stopped mattering the moment the doctors took over." My chest tightened. "That's not what I asked." "You need to stop. This digging, it's disgraceful. She's barely in the ground and you're already circling like a vulture for cash." "I'm not chasing money," I said, voice flat. "I'm chasing the truth they buried with her." "You sound ungrateful." That word again, delivered like a slap. Ungrateful. It stung more than I'd like to admit, as if silence was a debt I owed them, as if years of biting my tongue, of being the family's afterthought, meant nothing unless I smiled through it. "Sorry you feel that way," I said, and hung up, before she could turn another shared memory into a guilt trip. I dialed the attorney next. A receptionist picked up with that artificial chirp you only hear from someone reading off a script. I gave my full name, firm and slow. "I'd like to speak with the person handling my mother's estate." She paused, then dropped the line like a gavel. "I'm sorry. We've been directed to coordinate only through the executor." "Vanessa," I said, flat as stone. "Yes, Ms. Whittaker is our designated contact." "I'm a direct heir," I replied. "Not according to the final will, Miss Maynard." Her voice, clinical as ice. I said nothing, didn't slam the phone. Just let the call die and leaned back in my chair, pulse steadying under the weight of betrayal. The silence crept back in, the kind that didn't soothe but suffocated, the kind that used to follow me home after dinners where I smiled too much and spoke too little. I drifted toward the small wooden box on my shelf, the one that held scraps of affection too stubborn to toss. Inside I found it, a birthday card from Mom, her handwriting a little shaky but still familiar. "Don't let anyone tell you this family works without you." I remembered the moment she handed it to me. We were on the porch. Her hands trembled, but her voice didn't. "They all think they're in charge," she'd said, sipping her tea. "But they wouldn't last a week if you stopped holding it together." I laughed at the time, thinking it was sarcasm dipped in affection, but now it echoed like a prophecy I'd ignored. That night, there were no tears, no breakdown, just tabs, spreadsheets, bank records, property titles, accounts I once had access to, until I didn't. Each entry was a nail sealing the truth and burying their lie-filled version of the past. I called my bank, moved my money into a private trust under a shell entity, then scheduled a meeting with the financial advisor I hadn't seen since Mom's diagnosis. I pulled out the old folder marked Trust Docs 2016, the one I'd promised myself I wouldn't need, unless everything burned. If they were going to write me out of the narrative, I'd make sure the foundation they were standing on screamed my name. They shut the door on me. I'd just buy the land their door sits on. Before I even thought about sleep, if 4:17 a.m. counts, I recorded a voicemail. Calm, measured, lethal. Vanessa, I said, I'm not here to fight, but if you keep acting like I don't exist, I promise you'll regret how loudly I'll prove I do. They thought locking me out was the end. They forgot. I drafted the damn blueprint. 2 mornings later, I opened the dashboard for a company they never bothered to remember. Horizon Biotech. One of my first bets. One of my smartest. 10 years ago, I was broke, eating canned soup and rationing heat, when I scraped together just enough to invest in it. Tech's not your lane, Vanessa had scoffed. Do you even know what biotech means? Lester joked. I didn't need to. I just needed to believe in vision. And now, Horizon was prepping for IPO. Valuation? North of $900 million. I leaned back, laptop humming, heart louder. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt surgical. There's a kind of silence that roars when numbers speak louder than names ever could. I started pulling threads. 3 offshore accounts, already clean. 2 dormant LLCs, each wrapped in trusts with only my name on the deeds. It was time to wake them up. I didn't rush. Every move was deliberate. Clean cuts, no noise. Precision over panic. They thought I was begging for a seat at their table. What they didn't know was, I already owned the ground they were eating on. My phone buzzed, a calendar alert from 2 years ago. Review Draycott Holdings, partnership tax filings. A quiet whisper from my past self, reminding me who still remembered the truth. I let out a bitter smile. Even my digital alert showed me more loyalty than my own blood ever had. I hovered over the keyboard. Then, like tugging a thread that would unravel everything, I opened the email thread to Horizon's legal department. Subject line, URGENT, board access. I typed fast, clear. Please confirm reactivation of my board seat. Initiate full transfer of Horizon investment assets out of Draycott Holdings. Redirect to 3R Capital Management. Effective immediately. The response came within minutes. Understood, Miss Maynard. Transfer initiated. You still retain majority voting control. Still retain. They hadn't stolen everything. Not yet. I took a breath. Memory pulled me back to lunch with Lester 2 years ago. Rooftop restaurant. Pretentious menu. Clear skies. Full of hidden storms. He'd been in his zone, dominating the table with fake charm and inflated self-worth. Lester never argued. He performed. His tone was always a compliment dipped in poison. I went ahead and cleaned up a few contracts for you, he'd said casually mid-bite. Didn't think you were in the right headspace to deal with all the finance stuff. I had nodded back then. Foolish. I thought it was kindness. But now I saw it clearly. Control dressed as compassion. I stood, stretched out the tension, and walked to the printer. My hand was steady as steel. Notice of intent. Reclaim all jointly held investments. Issued under my name, Claire Maynard. I slid the paper into a manila folder. The corners bit into my skin like a reminder. This wasn't about feelings. This was about fact. I grabbed a Post-it, wrote in quick, firm strokes, I'm not angry. I'm awake. Just as I reached for the file drawer, my phone buzzed again. I thought it'd be another transaction confirmation. It wasn't. Subject line, Family Legacy Estate Meeting. sent by Vanessa's assistant. Of course. I stared at the screen, lips curling into a smirk so sharp it could have cut glass. They actually thought I was done. That I'd quietly accept the edits, wear the dress, and play the grateful extra in their family slideshow. Not this time. I tapped accept and whispered to myself, let's see how bold they get when they think the game's already over. By the time they realized I was holding aces, the cards would have already hit the table. I woke before dawn. My body wasn't tired. It was sore from holding back. Anger left to simmer too long doesn't boil. It hardens into something razor sharp and surgical. I grabbed my phone. That meeting invite was still glowing on my lock screen, wrapped in civility, soaked in betrayal. They wanted to paint this like just another family business meeting. But what they'd done? That wasn't business. That was war. I opened my banking app. I was ready to disconnect every cent I had from anything tied to them. I tapped the transfer button. Error. Access restricted. I stared. Tried again. Same cold message. Refreshed the screen. Still locked out. I switched to the legacy fund, the one Mom started before the cancer took her, the one I'd poured into for years. Same error. I hit the help icon. A chirpy chat window popped up. Hi there. How can we help you today? I typed, why is my access restricted on account ending in 3497? 3 minutes later, per the estate executor's directive, account changes must be authorized by the designated representative. Vanessa? Of course, it was her. Who else would rewrite the rules and then gatekeep the door? They hadn't just closed a door, they sealed every escape hatch and smiled while bolting it shut. I closed the app. For a split second, I couldn't feel my fingers. Numbness born not of fear, but of clarity. I opened the family group chat, more out of muscle memory than hope. I needed to see something that proved I wasn't imagining this betrayal. But it was gone. The thread we'd started during Mom's illness, updates, inside jokes, photos, vanished without a trace. I searched through the archives. Nothing. Typed a keyword, knowing it was pointless. No results found. They didn't just block my accounts. They evicted me from the digital rooms where decisions were made and memories shaped. I wasn't left out. I was erased. I stood, still wearing my robe, and walked to my office. No yelling, no theatrics, just a storm gathering behind steady breath. I opened my encrypted vault and created a new folder, Prep Alpha 1B, the beginning of the end, for them. I uploaded everything, screenshots, system errors, chat logs, email chains, timelines, refusal notes, every thread in a net they wouldn't see coming. Then I accessed a portal tied to shell companies I had buried a decade ago, built from equal parts foresight and distrust. I began rerouting assets one by one. Delaware, Nevada, BVI, each a safeguard. Let them try to untangle that knot. By midday, I'd written a cease and desist, not from rage, but from sharp legal precision. To whom it may concern, any further obstruction of assets or communications involving Claire Maynard will constitute fiduciary breach and trigger immediate legal action. This is not a warning. It is a declaration. I signed and sent it. Vanessa, CC'd. Mom's former legal team, included. No drama, just documentation. By evening, I sat with lukewarm tea and a pulse like steel. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I picked up. No human voice, just a robotic warning. We know what you're doing. You've made this personal. I didn't flinch. I was born into this, I said, voice level. You made it personal the day you erased me. Then I hung up. The room I walked into wasn't just a meeting. It was a carefully staged theater. But before I ever set foot in that conference room, they tried to shut the curtain on me completely. It started with a leak. An anonymous forward from someone at Horizon. Someone who still had a conscience. The document was glossy and rehearsed. The kind of subtle poison that gets mistaken for concern. Internal memo. Draycott Holdings. Bold at the top. We wish to express our concern regarding Miss Claire Maynard's recent instability. Recent behavior patterns suggest emotional fragility that necessitates discretion, compassion, and distance. They didn't dare call me crazy. No, too obvious. They called me fragile. The prettier insult. I stared at the screen. My jaw locked so tight it felt fused to bone. My name was spelled wrong. Maynard, with a misplaced letter, 3 separate times in an official document. On paper, just a typo. But I've seen that trick pulled too many times. Switch a single letter, and suddenly your records vanish. Your identity becomes negotiable. It wasn't a mistake. It was precision. A scalpel disguised as red tape. Then came the screenshots, family side chats, the ones I was never supposed to see. She's always been off. Poor Claire, bless her heart. The tone wasn't pity, it was strategy, but the one that pierced came from Vanessa. I'm doing what's best for her. Someone has to. Like she was saving me from myself. I called Julia at Horizon. She'd always treated me like I belonged. Did you see it? I asked. Silence then. Yes. Do you believe it? I asked. She hesitated again. Your sister said you had a breakdown. Confidential, of course. I ended the call. No scream, no shattering glass. I opened the window, breathed deep. Let their whispers slide off me like rain on wax. They weren't using evidence, they were using insinuation. Their sharpest weapon wasn't accusation, it was feigned concern. I didn't plan to explain. I planned to expose. I wrote a press statement. Not from me, from Horizon's counsel. Founder and strategic lead Delphine Maynard remains actively engaged. All estate-related legal matters under internal review. Cold, clinical, but enough to shift the narrative. The next morning, I began my own quiet war. Reactivated chains of authority, verified old logins, secured public-facing power. Everything with my name on it. I locked and bolted. But deep down, I knew they were already 3 steps ahead. That night, just as I closed my laptop, a message blinked in. No subject, no sender. Nice try. But they're already painting you out. Faster this time. I read it once, then again, and replied with one line. Let them paint. I'm about to rewrite the whole damn canvas. The boardroom I stepped into the next morning wasn't a meeting, it was a theater production. Draycott Holdings had spared no expense. Floor-to-ceiling glass, walnut paneling, power dressed in architecture. I entered at 9:58 sharp. Just early enough to command respect. Just late enough to make every head turn when the doors hissed closed. My outfit was surgical. Charcoal gray, no frills, no distractions. Only one accessory, my mother's watch, her silent permission. Lester sat like a self-declared judge. Vanessa, perched beside him, wore that rehearsed calm she saves for cameras. Even when there aren't any. No greetings, no acknowledgement. But no one dared tell me to leave either. I moved to the far end, silent, opened my laptop, synced to the conference screen. Instantly the first slide loaded. Maynard Estate, legal timeline and discrepancy audit. I let the silence hang for 10 long seconds, let them squirm. Then, clear and controlled, I spoke. This is a chronological breakdown of every legal record tied to the Maynard Estate over the last 10 years. I displayed everything, signature metadata, access logs, and the entire chain of custody. Pages flickered past, emails, timestamps, IP logs, all unimpeachable. Then the slide that broke the room's composure, a scanned contract they claimed I signed at 21, supposedly granting Lester financial control for my protection. This signature, I said evenly, was made on a day I was giving a keynote in Milan. Here's the boarding pass, time-stamped photo, and a transcript of my speech, given across an ocean from here. Silence. Absolute. As if someone had vacuumed the air out of the room. Then I advanced the slide. A dashboard popped up. Horizon Biotech. The very company I invested in when they laughed at me over canned soup. The trust they thought I forgot. The one they assumed had been drained, dissolved, irrelevant. Let me introduce you to trust account 217A, I said, calm as glass. Created a decade ago, fully under my control. Current balance, 1 billion. Yes, with a B, 1 click. Transfer complete, transferred. 3R Capital Holdings, under my name alone. You could hear their lungs forgetting how to breathe. Lester looked like the numbers had personally betrayed him. Vanessa's eyes darted to the window, maybe looking for the fire escape. This isn't what Mom wanted, she managed, her voice stretched thin. No, I said, it's exactly what she planned for. You just bet on me staying asleep. No objections, no motions, just silence. The meeting ended without a word. No one even grabbed their notepads. I stayed, packed slowly, let them feel my presence last. One junior exec, someone I barely remembered, hesitated, then slid me a folded note. They're planning something. Watch your back. Simple, sharp. I didn't ask who, I didn't react. I just nodded once and whispered, let them try. I flipped the table. The day after the boardroom ambush, I vanished. No calls, no emails, just me and the echo. Not peace, something deeper. That dull hum after something breaks. I curled on the couch, coffee gone cold in my hand, frozen but not numb. The news droned on. Fake smiles, corporate PR. They never mentioned me. But Vanessa? Front and center. Vanessa Whitaker steps down from Draycott Holdings. Personal reasons. Wellness. No forged documents. No billion-dollar fund shift. Just the usual spin. They did what they always do. Wrap shame in silk. Call it strategy. I never wanted applause, but I expected truth to matter more. That night, I went to the charity gala I'd RSVP'd for weeks ago. On time. Dressed to kill. Walked the carpet. Smiled like I wasn't made of fire. Played my part flawlessly. Then came the recognition ceremony. Name after name, each one louder than the last. Then, pause. Where mine should have been. But instead, silence. Deliberate. Rehearsed. One of the organizers, someone I'd laughed with at dinners who once asked me to sponsor her kid's fundraiser, looked me dead in the eye, then looked away. Not with shame, but with choreography. A few heads turned like they smelled tension. Others looked down, suddenly fascinated by the pattern in the carpet. I stood still, clapped, smiled faintly for the next name, like nothing inside me had shifted, but it had. They couldn't deny me, so they diminished me instead. If erasure didn't work, then dilution would. Let the world see me, just not too clearly. I didn't storm the podium. I didn't scream into microphones or write long, wounded monologues. Because silence isn't defeat. Sometimes it's what power sounds like when it knows it's already won. Back home, I opened my laptop. No notifications except one, quietly waiting in my inbox. Just so you know, not all of us voted with them. Simple, human. I read it once, then closed the tab. I didn't need comfort. I needed confirmation. A week later, Horizon crossed the $1.2 billion line. No press release, no champagne. I signed the equity transfer alone, at my kitchen table, in sweatpants and a hoodie, with Spotify humming in the background. I pulled open my desk drawer, and there it was. The nameplate from the gala, the one that labeled me Ms. Mayor, like I was a seat filler at my own legacy. Underneath it, I slipped my mother's note back into place. Her loops and curves etched into my memory forever. They still won't say my name right, I muttered, but they'll never erase it again. Not every legacy is handed down like silverware. Some of us have to carve ours into stone, with bare hands and bloody resolve. Friday morning, a small brown parcel appeared at my door. No sender, just my name, spelled perfectly, in her unmistakable cursive. Inside there was a single USB drive. No letter, no instructions, just one sticker on it, for her only, in my mother's handwriting. I plugged it in, half expecting blank files or old recipes. But then it began to play. The screen filled with grainy footage, her bedroom, dim light, pill bottles. Her voice faint, but unmistakable. Claire, she breathed. You are the light they tried to pretend didn't matter. but you're the one that made it all real. I didn't even notice I'd stopped breathing until the screen went black. Later, the doorbell rang. My stepfather stood there, holding an envelope. I hadn't seen him since the funeral. He looked smaller. Not physically, but in spirit. She wrote this the week before she lost her voice, he said. I didn't speak. Just nodded and closed the door without looking back. I sat on the floor, letter trembling in my hands. It was short, steady, gentle. Her voice, preserved in ink. You were meant to lead. I left them instructions. Whether they followed is no longer your burden. If they listen, guide them. If they don't, take what's yours. That's what she wrote. No metaphors, no poetry, just truth, unvarnished and final. You were always the one who saw where the foundation cracked. There were no metaphors, no drama, just truth. I didn't cry, I didn't rage. I folded the letter, placed it beside the USB, and carried both to the small wooden box I kept in my office. I unlocked it, not to bury them, but to preserve them. Evidence, not of war, but of warmth. Proof that before they chose to forget me, someone once chose me first. The next morning, I woke before dawn, poured my coffee, watched the sun creep up the edge of the world like it had nothing left to prove. I thought about everything they tried to take, my name in the ledger, my place at the table, my voice in the vote. They stole my name in rooms full of noise, I whispered. But she gave it back in a whisper. Some chapters don't end in revenge. They end with something softer, something stronger. The next day, an order was sent to me. When I saw the box, I was startled. The box was exactly as I remembered. Same weight, same shape, but now with one cruel addition, a red stamp that read, "Return to sender." My handwriting was still there, a little smudged from weather or carelessness, but unmistakably mine. I placed it on the kitchen table, didn't open it right away. It was the birthday gift I had sent my mother months before she died. A delicate scarf woven with her favorite blue greens, tucked in with a handwritten card. When I finally peeled back the lid, the scarf hadn't moved. The folds I made were still there. So was the sealed card. Some truths don't need confirmation. I'd felt it before I opened the box. She never got it. Hours later, someone from the hospital confirmed it. Vanessa had handed her one just like mine on the same day. Said it was her idea. I didn't cry. I didn't break anything. I just sat there. That evening, as the sky turned the color of old memories and spring whispered against the glass, my phone rang. It was Vanessa. I didn't answer right away. Let it ring to the edge of voicemail, then picked up. Her voice sounded different, softer, but hollow. I didn't expect you to win, she said quietly. I didn't come to win, I answered. She hesitated, but I didn't think you'd burn it all down. I stood by the sink, one hand gripping the edge of the counter. I didn't burn anything, I said evenly. I just stopped watering what was killing me. There was a long silence. I was always better at pretending things were fine, she admitted. You did the hard part. You actually let go. I didn't thank her. I didn't offer forgiveness. Some ties don't snap. They just loosen until they're no longer holding anything at all. After we hung up, I didn't feel closure, just clarity. I walked to my office and opened the drawer that held what was left of the war. Contracts, forged signatures, and the residue of people who should have protected me. I pulled out the forged will, held it for a long time. Then quietly, I burned it. Not out of spite, not because I needed revenge, because I was done letting it sit beside things that had real meaning. I kept the letter, the USB, the things that held truth. I made tea, curled up on the couch, and watched the city glow, tiny lights coming alive like stars that refused to wait for night. The heaviness was gone, replaced with something steadier. Not pride, not peace, but place. That night, I didn't open my laptop. I didn't strategize. I sat at the window, tea untouched, and watched the city. I didn't just survive them. I whispered to the glass. I outgrew them. This wasn't the end of a name. It was the beginning of a legacy, one they could never edit out. Sometimes the loudest power is the one that doesn't shout. It simply refuses to disappear. There were days I doubted my worth. Nights I almost disappeared into the silence they shoved around me. Moments I believed their lies. But what I learned, what I want you to carry, is that your value doesn't come from who claps for you. It comes from knowing deeply and quietly who you are. Speak on your own terms, and when you do, speak in a way they'll never forget.